Good morning, everybody. Happy August 9th. Thank you for joining me here on Real Talk Live. Super excited about this episode. So thank you again so much for joining me. Anytime I get to talk about the real estate market as a data junkie is a fun day for me. So got a lot of data to share. I thought it would be the perfect time given that 7 months of the year are already in the record book. So looking forward to really reflecting on the first half of the year and really, where is this market taking us for the balance of 2023 and into 2024? We're certainly in a very fluid and complex real estate market, navigating historically undersupply of homes. We've got tight lending standards still. Mortgage delinquency rates are at all-time lows. Rate volatility, 53-year low unemployment, averaging 3.4 to 3.7% for the last year and a half. So, all of those factors and dynamics coming together to really make a very complex and fluid real estate market. So a couple house cleaning items before we dive into the data. I'm going to try, assuming time permitted. If you've got comments or questions for me, go ahead and type those in. I'll try to address as many as I can afterwards. But your leaders and I are scheduling our coffee and conversations. And so I have those starting next week. So if there are questions you want answered today, great. If I should be in your offices in the coming weeks, we can talk more in depth then as well. But please don't hesitate typing in some questions or comments as we go along. But I'll look to address those at the end. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to pull up my presentation here. So really, what I wanted to focus on today, we certainly understand and we all know that we are either in or have been in a contracting market, certainly relative to units. I think the real question for us is, has that market, are we in a new norm? Has it plateaued? Has it stabilized? Again, primarily relative to units. We'll address prices as well. But are we still in that volatile market or a contracting market, or have we experienced a plateau or stabilization? And I think when we look at year over year, those gaps, when we're comparing the first half of this year to the first half of last year, pretty significant declines. I think we also have to keep perspective that the first half of last year, we were still in that historic post-pandemic, really what I would refer to as unicorn years. And this first half of this year, we obviously have contracted some. And so those gaps are significant. I think as we progress through the second half of this year, those year over year comparisons are going to shrink. But I think looking at answering the question, have we plateaued or have we stabilized into our new norm? We've really got to look at month over month trends. And so that's what we're really going to focus on. And I will say I've focused on national numbers as well as the Portland metro area and King County, because those are the two largest areas that give us the greatest amount of data to really study and analyze. But with that said, if you're outside of those markets, I've never seen a real estate marketplace, and I'm speaking for the entire country, that is experiencing almost the exact same circumstances. So even though these numbers and data that we're going to share may not be referring to your hyper local market, the trends, I would argue, are probably almost identical. So let's dive right in, and we'll talk about prices. On the screen is Case-Shiller, FHFA, and CoreLogic. So have home value declines stabilized? Again, going back to those unicorn years of the spring of 2020 to the spring of 2022, we saw a 43% increase in average sales price. We've got to really keep in perspective those 2 years. Again, I would refer to unicorn years, but very consistent themes on those three. And again, these are national prices. This is Black Knight and Freddie Mac. But all five of these show almost very similar trends, where the first half of last year, solid month over month. Again, this is not year over year. This is month over month trends. Then we move into the second half of last year, and we start seeing month over month declines. And then at the beginning of this year through the first half, we start seeing month over month inclines again. Now, I read something very interesting earlier this week that around prices, and the reason that they have remained so resilient is simple demand versus supply. But that surge in housing demand in 2020 and 2021 was so substantial that the Federal Reserve researchers estimate that housing supply would have needed to increase by 300% in order to match the pandemic housing demand. When I read that we know that we have an undersupply of inventory, but that surge was so significant between the spring of 2020 and 2022 that we would have needed 300% increase just to match that demand. And so that's really what has kept prices elevated. And so that's a national landscape. Let's transition to Portland Metro and King County. So this is a look at Portland Metro average sales price, month over month trend beginning in May. So we see June through December and into January, month over month declines, but then a rally through the first half of the year. So May of 2022 was the absolute peak in average sales price. Average sales price in Portland Metro for the month of May 2022 was $649,600. We reached the bottom in January of this year at $532,900. So those are for the months. Now that from peak to bottom was a decrease of 17.9%. But if you look at the peak again in May of 22 to July of 2023, it's only off 4.5%. And if you compare July of this year to July of last year, it's down just 2.4%. So whatever declines we experienced through the second half of last year, we've made up almost all of it through the first half of this year. And looking at July, and we see a modest decline there of 1%, I would argue that that is more seasonality than is there something different going to happen in the second half of this year. And I'm confident in saying that because if we look at 2012 to 2023, every July, but in that 12 years, and that's the greatest decade in the history of real estate, 50% of the time, or 6 of those 12 Julys, saw declines compared to June. 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2023, July's average sales price was less than June's average sales price. Let's look at King County. Again, for folks that aren't familiar with the greater Seattle Puget Sound marketplace, the largest county in the Puget Sound area. Very similar trends. Second half of last year, we start to see those declines month over month. Then another rally starting the year. And again, I would draw your attention to the fact that July is probably more seasonality, 67% of the time. So there was 8 out of the last 12 Julys where the average sales price was less than June's average sales price. 2012, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2022, and 2023, July average sales price was less than June. In April, so May was the peak in Portland. April was the peak for King County at 1.13 million was the average sales price. January was the bottom, 891, 282 was the average sales price in the month of January in King County. So from peak to bottom, there was a 21.1% decrease. But if we look from the peak of April of 22 to July of 2023, it's off just 8.8%. But surprisingly, July of last year to July of this year, average sales price is up 1.3%. So again, whatever prices have done through the second half of the year of last year has been almost all made up in the first half of this year. And so I think it's fair to say that whatever market that we are in, we're in that new norm and prices have stabilized. Again, that was a contraction in the second half of the year, but a strong first half of the year at least got us back to or near the historical high in April of 22 for King County and May in Portland Metro. So those are the two marketplaces with respect to prices relative to the second half of last year and the trends month over month to start the year. And we almost made up all of that. Now, there's a lot of talk about recessions and are we going to be in one? Is there going to be a soft landing? We all know that the Federal Reserve has been on a tear with its policy campaign. I'm sorry, my computer just took me to a different page, so I apologize for that. But back to the Federal Reserve's tightening policy campaign, the fastest and strongest since the 1980s, 11 hikes since March of 2022 to the benchmark interest rate. And it doesn't have a direct correlation or impact on mortgage interest rates, but there is a residual impact on that. But a recession does not mean falling prices. So we look at the last 6 recessions, if we actually enter one. And right now, I think there's some optimism over the last couple of jobs reports and inflation, how that's cooling, that maybe we avoid that. But if there is one, you'll see in 1980, 1981, 2001, 2020, what prices did in those recessions. 1991, there was a modest decline. 2008, totally different set of circumstances, total collapse and meltdown of the financial system that obviously impacted housing and the subprime market. So that, I think, is an anomaly. So if we do experience a recession, that does not mean that prices will be negatively impacted. What does a recession mean for mortgage rates? Well, it doesn't mean a recession does mean falling mortgage rates. You look at the recessions in 80, 81, 91, 2001, 2008, and 2020, mortgage interest rates all came down during that recessionary period. So again, whether it's we experience a soft landing for the U.S. economy or not, even if we enter a recession, it does not mean negative consequences relative to prices and mortgage rates. This is home sales metro closed units in Portland. Very similar to prices as far as the trends. Second half of last year, and I'm going to sound like a broken record as we go through all these slides. It's almost identical in terms of the contraction that we experienced in the marketplace through the second half of last year, and then the growth that we experienced in the first half of this year. Now, I've just got to draw your attention to the comments that I made at our kickoff events to start the year. And some of you may remember this. Felicia, I know you reminded me of it. And Felicia's in our Federal Way office if you're on here. But she reminded me of the comment that I made. If we're going to do the same activities, have the same number of conversations, we will do less business. That's a mathematical guarantee. We have to do more. We have to talk to more people. We have to ask more questions just to do the same level of business last year. And if we want to grow our businesses, which is absolutely achievable, we have to do more than that. And so these numbers are definitely ringing true to those comments as we see the decline month over month through the second half of last year. And again, the rally in the first half of this year. So for Portland Metro, at 12,372 closings through July, that is near 2012 numbers. Now, 2012 started the greatest decade in the history of real estate, but was also coming out of the worst recession since the Great Depression. And so, but the numbers do mirror 2012, at least through the first half of the year. Now, just like prices, I would draw your attention to July, that being down. I do believe that's more seasonality than is the market doing something different mid-year based on the economy, inflation, whatever the Federal Reserve's doing, because 7 out of 12 Julys between 2012 and 2023. 7 of those Julys out of the 12 saw a decline over June. So 2012, 2016, 17, 18, 21, 22, and 23 closed units in July were less than June. But for all of us, in the business, including homeowners, the average sales price through July in 2012 was $269,300. The average sale price this year through July year to date is $599,300. So that's $330,000 more in average sales price than it was in 2012. So we're making more money. People have a lot more equity, per transaction than in 2012. Transitioning to King County closed units, again, very similar. Second half of last year, a real contraction in closed units, a rally through the first half of the year. And I would also contend that seasonality is the reason for July than any sort of abnormality or anything that we can't control over, whether it's the Federal Reserve or anybody else. At 12,954 closed units through July, that really mirrors 2011 numbers for King County. It was 12,822 then. But again, the average sales price year to date in July of 2011 was 404,000 and some change, where this year is 996,000. So 592,000 plus increase in average sales price compared to 2011. Now, going back to that July seasonality, 8 out of 12 Julys. So again, 2012 to 2023, that's 12 Julys. 8 of those 12 saw declines in July closed units compared to June. Pended units. So Portland Metro, again, a broken record, a contraction through the second half of last year, followed by a rally in the first half of this year. 13,787 pended units in the Portland Metro area through July of this year. That really mirrors 2012, 2011 numbers. 14.8 was in 2012, 12.5 in 2012. So right in that kind of end of the Great Recession and the beginning of the greatest boom ever. But the average sales price this year, again, was $599,300 when it was $269,300 last year. So significant equity, significant increase in average sales price, significant income and revenue opportunities for sales professionals. But I would also draw your attention to June and July, month over month, we saw declines. Again, I think that's more seasonality than it is the market about to do something different. 10 of 12 Julys and 10 of 12 Junes compared to May all saw declines in pended units, 10 out of the last 12 years. So that's 83% of the time. And I think that's a good enough data set to draw a reasonable conclusion that there's just seasonality in month over month comparisons. Then is that a new trend? And I expect that, again, we've stabilized with respect to, prices have been resilient, but I think we've stabilized with respect to units. Looking at King County, same sort of story. Contraction in the second half of last year, followed by a rally through the first half of this year. And also seasonality in June and July. Unlike Portland Metro, where 10 of the 12 Julys over June and June over May, it was 11 of 12 of those years saw June short of May and July short of June. So again, I think there's enough data there to support that this is more reflection of seasonality than it is, what is the market. So my conclusions then for both prices and units, to answer the question at the top of the slide, have home sales decline stabilized. I believe they have. I believe we are in our new norm. Whatever contraction we were going to experience and did experience, it was really isolated to the second half of last year. And I think we've plateaued and stabilized to this is the new norm. This is the market that we're going to be in relative to units. I think prices, again, we've almost rallied all the way back or near or to the peak of April and May for our respective markets of last year. I think an interesting note is just this is showing times, showing traffic index report. And so this is the last 6 Junes and of showing time activity. And this again speaks to just the demand and supply issue that we have, certainly where demand far exceeds supply. So the higher the number means the average home received more buyer visits in a given month. The initial index was set at 100 in January of 14. And so you look at the traffic throughout June, historically, even this year is far above the pre-pandemic times. And in those ones in green, really, again, I think are those unicorn years that drawing almost any comparison to anything, it seems somewhat not real reasonable, but the traffic this June at least was above 2 of those Junes in those unicorn years. So again, I think that speaks to there still is much greater demand than there is supply. So what can we look to for the balance of this year and into 2024? So you've got 3 groups here. You got Fannie Mae, Mortgage Bankers Association, and NAR. 2023 forecast relative to existing home sales, their forecast for 2024 and that percent change. I think what's really important to think about here is the shortfall. NAR reported this last year. Earlier this year, that we've got a shortfall of 6.5 million single family homes. Now, if we include multifamily in that gap shrinks to 2.3 million. But think about this, between 2012 and 2022, there was 15.6 million households formed. There was just 13.3 million units started. And there was just 11.9 million units completed. So at the end of the day, there's just not a likely scenario that leads to an inventory level that gets us close to historically normal or balanced. So we're going to be in this upside down demand to supply for the foreseeable future. But this is the forecast for Fannie Mae, Mortgage Bankers Association, NAR for this year and their forecast for next year. I think it's also worth noting that 2024 is an election year. So it always comes up, does a presidential election impact the housing market? And there's been 13 presidential elections since 1970. 11 of those 13 saw existing single family homes increase the year following that presidential election. 1980 and 1988 were the only 2 years, so those elections, so 1981 and 1989, that saw a decrease in existing single family home sales. But every election since 1992 to current day, existing single family home sales increased the next year. So conclusion is presidential elections do not negatively impact, influence, cause a decline in existing home sales. And I think that's, as you move through 2024 and as we move through 2024, and we have clients and customers asking around questions around does the election impact housing? All the data suggests that it does not. And that doesn't mean we won't see a decline, but it won't be based on history. It won't be because of a presidential election. I think that's one of those data points that's always good to know and have handy, at least to use every 4 years when that comes up. All right. So takeaways. That's the market. That's the prices impact. That's the units impact, both nationally as well as regionally for us here in the Pacific Northwest. very consistent storylines, contraction in both those sectors through the second half of last year, followed by a rally the first half of this year. Prices back to almost peak values, and units, at least I think, have stabilized and plateaued into our new norm. But here's one of the challenges for all of us. Headlines do more to terrify than clarify. Headlines do more to terrify than clarify. We have to control the narrative. Let's not leave it to the media. Let's not leave it to what I would refer to as bad actors to educate the consumers. Let's be the subject matter experts. Let's be the financial advisors in the asset class of housing for all of our customers. And again, just know the data. Be the subject matter expert. Data is our most valuable currency. And oftentimes, and I've said this before, headlines are attention grabbers. If you actually read the entire narrative or the article, it's typically not as doom and gloom as the headlines made out to be. So again, let's not allow the media or bad actors to educate our customers and consumers. If you've worked with me long enough, you know that I believe this at my core. Regardless of the economy, regardless of the market, there will always be enough opportunities to achieve our goals in this business. Always, always, always. So I'm using 4.16 million annual sales. That's less than what everybody on a previous slide has forecasted. But at that number, there's 11,397 sales every day. So take 4.16 divided by 365, 11,395 sales every day. And here's the reality of it. Life always goes on, regardless of what's going on around us, regardless of what the Federal Reserve's doing, regardless of how the economy and market's going to respond to those things and those decisions. Life always goes on, and life events determine decisions to buy or sell real estate. If you break that down even more, take the 11,397 divided by 24 hours, there's 475 sales every hour. Divide that 475 by 60, every 8 minutes a house sells. So there will always be enough opportunities, regardless of the contraction that we're experiencing. And I just heard a statistic last week, where one realtor is leaving the business every 4.6 minutes. Now, I don't know how long we've actually been on here, but given that data point, there's been several realtors that have already left the industry, which is not a bad thing since it's reached its highest level of membership ever. So there's always going to be enough opportunities to achieve your goals in this business, regardless of the things that we can't control. I love this quote by Vince Lombardi. Confidence is contagious. So is lack of confidence. Know the data, move forward in a confident way. Be that financial advisor to your customers in the asset class of housing. And I said this at our earlier kickoff event. Success is going to be enjoyed by those that are the most willing to be inconvenienced. Success comes at our inconvenience. It does not come at our convenience. Let's embrace the complex market that it is. And I believe that complex markets give us the greatest opportunity to show our value proposition to a customer, whether they're buying, selling, investing, whatever their individual situation is. Complex market times give us the greatest opportunity to demonstrate our value proposition. So let's seize that opportunity. We are 98 days away from whatever income and revenue we're going to earn in 2023. Again, if you've worked with me long enough, you know that there's obviously December 31st is the end of the calendar year, but November 15th, assuming a 45-day close, anything after that date is really income or revenue in the following year. So starting tomorrow, we've got 98 days to whatever we want to achieve from an income and revenue standpoint. We've got 98 days to do it, and I know we can. And again, my conclusion to this, I believe that both prices and units have plateaued and stabilized, and this is our new norm. And it's a very achievable norm to reach all of our individual and collective goals. So thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to look to see if there's any questions, comments. I think, hey, and we're right at 30 minutes. So even achieving my goal of keeping it to a 30-minute time limit. So I'm not really seeing any questions or comments. So either I crushed it or no, there's a thank you. So I'm going to feel pretty good about this. I'm looking forward to scheduling coffee and conversations in each of your offices. Look forward to sitting face to face and in person, fielding any questions you have. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Super excited for the second half of this year. And again, let's embrace the complex market that this is. Be the subject matter experts. Don't let anybody else, media, bad actors, anybody else otherwise, be the ones to educate our customers about the true market conditions that exist today. I'll send this presentation to each of everybody on the leadership team. And if you want this, they can share it with you. Use it at your will. And again, thank you for your time. Have a productive rest of the day and week, and we'll see you soon. Take care.